matinee edition, Jake.
Hello.
It's matinee off. Now, this is we're doing this one for the Europeans today.
For the Europeans, yeah.
They
need a little love. Friendly. They need a lot of love right now.
Yeah, is that true? Okay, we'll get back to that. That'll be a topper later. But we've got man of the hour, Jeffrey Kluger. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, I lost my prop. Oh, here it is. I put it on this shelf. The book, Gemini or Gemini, we shall debate.
Yeah.
We shall debate that.
You even in the book got into the debate of how to pronounce it, and
absolutely, yeah.
So how do you say it when you're going out on this junket here?
Lately I have slipped back into Gemini, which I'm not proud of because I always considered myself, enough of a NASA junkie that unless I was talking about astrology, I would always say Gemini. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, I barely ever said the word Gemini. It was all Gemini 6, Gemini 12, the Gemini program. And I went to a summer camp called Camp Comet, which was this space age camp for boys in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. All of our bunks were geodesic domes named after the planets. And one summer, the counselors, with a couple of off-camp engineers, built a full-size Gemini capsule set in a frame that allowed it to both pitch and yaw.
Wow.
And it had working instrument panels that were connected to a control room outside that also had working instrument panels. The entire thing was made of wood. It was just, I spent 4 summers at that camp in that capsule, and we always called it the Gemini simulator.
I'm desperately
that's
searching if this is still open, Jake.
No, unfortunately, it's not.
No, okay. I was gonna make me and Jake go. We have threatened before that we were gonna try to go to space camp together and film the whole thing. And this, so what happened to simulator? Does the simulator exist still? Did you buy it? Is it in your
house? No. The camp was. It never would have survived. It was, 1966 they built it, so it would have fallen apart. But the camp was ultimately bought, and they basically razed all of the existing structures and started over.
Man, we gotta find it.
A relic lost to time. Yeah.
We gotta find it or build it.
It's gotta be on that. It's got to be on that eBay site you found with all the flight jackets and stuff. To be on there.
Oh yeah, we went a couple weeks ago, Jeffrey. We went down an eBay rabbit hole, finding somebody's selling on eBay like current Soyuz mission backup jackets. We don't know where this person on eBay is getting them, but like cosmonauts that have just flown. Maybe I should buy one from the most recent flight.
I have a pretty good idea where they're getting them from.
Yeah.
But that one could be a keepsake. If this is the last crewed Soyuz mission to ever fly, Jake, maybe we should get a jacket from it. The launch pad fell apart, for Christ's sake.
Oh, that is dark. That is dark. Yeah, all right.
They'll be fine.
Okay.
Jake, it's pretty early. I don't know if you brought a drink or just something fun to drink out of.
Oh, I have one. Yeah.
All right, nice. What the hell is that?
I'm trying to think how to orient this, but that's not. I had to get it. Spicy tamarind
chili.
Wow.
Yeah, tamarindo chili.
And I'm not great at time zones right now. It's the morning.
In New York?
No.
No. Jake lives in Mexico now. Is it noon?
It's officially after. It's after lunch now, so it's safe now.
Well, because sometimes where the daylight saving doesn't land properly, so sometimes we're 2 hours apart.
Right.
Usually we're 1.
We're 1 today. We're 1 in the winter. Yep.
What do you got up there in New York?
1:05 p.m.
Oh, I meant, do you bring anything to drink?
No.
You got stuff going on, man.
Nothing for me, yeah.
Hitting the junket.
I got some vodka in the kitchen, but it's a little early in the day.
I have an entire pot of coffee.
Nice.
And I have a very festive mug. Here, I'll go one shot on this.
Oh, I like that.
Very festive, but I'm outside of Philly, so I've got the Liberty Bell. I thought we might have a little Liberty Bell talk in this. There is a Mercury portion of the book.
Do that. Yeah. I was glad that I was able to include Mercury in the book. I think it was essential to sort of give both the science and the human piece of that program and how it sort of evolved into Gemini as well.
Yeah, you went deep on like the actual spacecraft side in a way that I feel like a lot of people gloss over of when they were coming out of Mercury, what they were going to do from a hardware perspective. I thought that was a really fun portion of the book.
Yeah, and just making a larger capsule. Back in '97, I was, or 98 rather, I did our cover story on John Glenn's return to space. And I was sitting in his Senate office interviewing him. And on an end table next to the couch where I was sitting was a model of the Mercury spacecraft, just, big enough to hold in your hand, about as tall as a shoebox put on end. And, I didn't think anything of it until I looked at a label on it and it said 1/9 scale, which meant just 9 times
Jeez.
bigger than that toy on John Glenn's table was the size of his spacecraft. It was astonishing how they had to. The slogan, or the saying among the astronauts is, "You don't climb in the Mercury, you put it
Put
on."
it on.
And
Yeah.
that's really what it was like. It was like a titanium garment. It was so tiny.
Jeez, yeah. No, I think even yeah, Mercury for sure. I think even in like Gemini capsules it's the same idea. Like, I mean, it's bigger, but you had two people in it, and just
Right.
hearing some of the logistics of like this, going outside the capsule. Like, are you like just trying to like change into your flight suit in there?
Right.
Like, I can't even imagine
I
the
know, it's incredible.
complicated.
And as Jim Lovell pointed out to me, the Gemini capsule was slightly less than twice the habitable volume of the Mercury, which means it
Yeah,
was
it's
two
worse. Yeah,
men in a small ship, and they actually had less space per capita than they did in the Mercury.
yeah,
Less space, more poop. It's not a good combo
So,
for.
yeah.
Yeah.
no, that's a very
Like literally have to like poop on the guy's lap. Like it is it's not an
I think
ideal.
that's
It's not
exactly how Jeffrey put it in the book as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Well, that's why
artfully.
Frank Borman went 9 days on Gemini 7 without pooping before his body finally told him, enough, you can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. But his idea was, if a man can't control his own bowels, he can't control anything at all. And he was pretty adamant that he was going to try.
Jeez. Yeah.
I'm curious how. Before we talk too much about the content of the book, I want some like context on why this book now, based on all the space books you've written and everything that you've written at time and elsewhere. Like, was this something that you had cooking for a while and it was just finally the right time? Is there something recently that made you go, oh, I should finish that Gemini book up?
Gemini book. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is something that I had I've been thinking about for a long time. I probably first started contemplating it in 2008 or so, because in 2010 I was on a Middle East a morale tour of American bases throughout the Middle East, and the featured speakers. There were two pilots who had achieved great things in the Air Force, but the other three celebrities on the trip, much more celebrated than the pilots, were Jim Lovell, Gene Cernan, and Neil Armstrong. So you've got the first man on the moon, the last man on the moon, and the commander of Apollo 13. It was a pretty rarefied group. And I remember in 2010 asking Armstrong if he'd be willing to be interviewed for a book on Gemini. And he demurred and said, "Well, maybe if you send me some questions via email, I'll consider responding to them." But that's how long ago I was considering this book. And from 2010 to 2023, when I got the contract, I wrote about either 4 or 5 other books. And after each one of them, I thought, is it now time for Gemini? Should I do that book that I've been wanting to do for so long? And finally, a couple of years ago, when I had exhausted the book ideas I was working on, I turned back to Gemini. And I think I think there are a lot of reasons to do a book on Gemini. Tom Wolfe owns the Mercury space. People like me can write about Mercury in other books, but for at least another 50 years, until The Right Stuff is a century old, no one's going to try to write the definitive Mercury book, and nobody should. The Right Stuff just tells it. I've read it 4 times. I plan to read it 5 or 6 more before I shuffle off this mortal coil. And, I and other people had written about Apollo in depth, but nobody wrote about the Gemini program. It was very much the overlooked middle sibling of, the troika of great space programs. And I thought it was in time to tell the story and, make clear that not only without Gemini would there have been no Apollo, there wouldn't have been the rendezvous and dockings that we routinely do with the International Space Station. There wouldn't be the 6-hour EVAs that astronauts typically go out on. There wouldn't be the long duration missions of people in space for a year or more. Gemini just kicked open the door to all of those technologies, all of those practices, all of that sort of intrepid energy that astronauts brought to long-term missions.
Do you think that like part of that is because, in a way, not in a way, I think officially Gemini was supposed to be like part of Apollo. Like it was really like, it's like Apollo phase 0, right? It was because it didn't exist initially. It was supposed to go Mercury straight into Apollo. And then they kind of went, well, actually we don't have any idea what we're doing and we got to practice some things first. And so Gemini became like that. And so like in a weird way, it's almost like part of Apollo. Do you think it kind of gets overshadowed because of that? Or is there some other reason that we don't have?
Well, I think it gets overshadowed for two reasons. We had the question of novelty with Mercury, the first Americans in space, and the first American in space, then the first American to orbit the Earth, then the first American to fly a long duration mission, Gordon Cooper's 22 orbit 33-hour mission. So it had a great novelty to it. Apollo obviously had its own headline making power because that was 3 men in a very sophisticated ship leaving the gravity field of Earth for the first time. And Gemini just didn't have either one of those that headline making potential. Now, that's not to say that the program didn't get a ton of attention. I remember going to school when Gemini missions would be launched, and on launch day there would be televisions rolled into classrooms, and our classes, our class sessions would be abbreviated. So we could watch the missions unfold live, but they still didn't have the historical impact of Mercury and Apollo.
Yeah, it's interesting too because space nerds like us get so into the Gemini missions that it's like I feel like I don't stop and think about the perspective outside of our community of nerds, and you're right that. It's like, well, first we did this, then we had 2 guys, and then we finally went to the moon. And it's like, all right, you just shortened like a lot of the most interesting missions that we've ever flown, let alone pausing to talk about ejection seats, which were a chaotically terrible idea. But like, I think you paint a great picture of understanding why it stuck in the program and why, like, testing be damned, they were still part of the mission because they couldn't afford an escape tower from a mass perspective at that point, and all these different reasons that they stuck around. But I don't know, I always think about the ejection seats, both that and in the shuttle, as just an absolutely horrible idea.
Yeah, terrible idea. That would have subjected them, had they ever ejected from a moving Gemini, a moving Titan booster, it would have subjected them to 20 Gs or more. I mean, the booster could kill them, but so could their escape system. It just would.
I thought that was a great way you put it, though. You were like, of all the, they already know that this whole machine has many ways to kill them, and the seats were just one more way that it could.
Right,
was
exactly.
A good perspective shift on, they probably weren't that worried about it.
They weren't that worried about it, and they were pilots. They had all ejected at one point or another, but not at 20 Gs and not at the speed that the Titan missile was flying.
Yeah.
They probably knew if they survived, they have the best story of anyone. So
exactly, but they would have left 2 smoking holes in the side of the spacecraft. So that pretty much would have been the end of that Gemini capsule.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. No, I guess it's like Anthony. I talk a lot about how I'm really into the operational side of space activity. Like, the technology is cool and the accomplishments are cool, but like I get really excited about just the idea of people like coming together and like working at it like a pace and getting like a rhythm and figuring out all these operational challenges and solving them and implementing the program. And I feel like Gemini is like the shining beacon of that, because it's like getting the work done is not sexy, but you have to get the work done, right? Like this is literally just like, it's practicing. It's like literally like going down a checklist of like, we have to be able to do this and this and invent these things and practice these things, get all the astronauts so a little bit of space time so that when they go into Apollo they're already veterans. Like it's just all these like really clutch accomplishments of Gemini that they don't really make a lot of good headlines, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they were all basically single point failures. If you don't have rendezvous and docking, that's it.
Yeah.
Your Apollo program is over. If you don't have long duration space flight, that's it. Your Apollo program is over. If you don't have spacewalking, then there's no training in exiting a vehicle, which is exactly what they did on the surface of the moon. So every one of these things was, it was failure of mission, failure of lunar objective, if any of those things had not been worked out. So you're very right that it was very much a developmental arc from the end of Mercury to the beginning of Apollo, straight through Gemini, and every step they took was one more technological and navigational step that they didn't have before.
Yeah. I draw a lot of analogies to kind of the things that we celebrate today in the modern space companies. If we talk about SpaceX, their ability to sort of iteratively develop, like kind of like pick off one tech tree problem and then solve it, and you'll make a little bit of failure along the way, but like step by step they sort of like advance very, very quickly down this path where they get something really incredible at the end of it. And I feel like Gemini Apollo is sort of like the best example of when NASA could do that, because like Gemini is exactly that, like very good cadence. Like every couple of months they're going up with a brand new crewed flight. They had like such a specific, clear, detailed list of objectives that they would just kind of knock off, and it was just there was something very beautiful about the pace and I don't know,
and the willingness to adapt too, right? Like the Gemini 6-7 situation where they went from a screwed up Agena to, all right, well, we could figure this out with the hardware we've got. That's something that we are very much in the. Jake's saying Gemini, so you're going to have us convinced by the end of this to say Gemini. I think out of respect, Jake, we
just want to fit in. I just want to fit in.
If we can pull it off for the next 41 minutes. Like I do think there's a lot of kindred spirit going on between the modern day commercial space industry, like being in its Gemini era, in that they're trying a bunch of different things. They're pushing their capabilities. We always joked on this show that Jared Isaacman was running his own private Gemini program under the Polaris program. We'll see how that develops now, given where he's going. But there, and not only that, but also the kind of I mean, we did have a little bit of rebellion from the astronauts in the Mercury program. Scott Carpenter not laying off the gas on his flight, but there was a lot of bring the corned beef sandwich, take off your flight suit when you're not supposed to. They were pushing the boundaries and saying like, well, we're up here, we know how we need to do things, so we're gonna push that back on you from an operational perspective. That's the personality that a lot of commercial companies have when it's like, well, we are going to land on the moon, so what paperwork do you need to get together so that we can go do that? Because I don't know if you see behind you, we have this giant thing that was ready to launch. Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, it's very much Alan Shepard's light this candle command, and basically what Gemini did, what SpaceX is doing, what Blue Origin to a lesser extent is working to do, is to light the damn candle and, to do it fast. SpaceX has, you mentioned the iterative process, and that's especially true with SpaceX. I think they've launched 10 Starships at this point. Now, they haven't had a whole lot of success with it, which is one of the reasons that Sean Duffy is reopening the contract for another human landing system. But, SpaceX has been able to push hard and to push fast. They've launched, I forget the total number now, but they've launched hundreds of Falcons, of Falcon 9s since they first began flying in 2012. And, they've improved them steadily with each one. First stages weren't landing early on. Now they've flown some stages 7 and 8 times.
30 times. Some are in the 30s. 30
wow.
Yeah, there's a couple in the 30s now. That's what.
Wow.
That's also like the fact that we all follow this and we're like, yeah, it landed again on the boat. It's like
Right.
multiple hundred landings on a boat, and we're like,
Right.
I don't mention it anymore. Like,
Right.
I'll tell you if
Exactly.
it fails because now it's
Right.
just part of it.
Yeah, and I was talking to I think it was Scott Kelly. I did a piece, interviewed a number of people for a piece I did on back in early November on the 25th anniversary of the space station. And I think it was Scott Kelly. I was raising doubts about the human landing system, about that, that long, tall, silo-shaped spacecraft that's going to take, or is supposed to take, the place of the lunar module, which had this wonderfully low center of gravity and 4 splayed legs, and they're trying to land this rolling pin straight up on the surface of the moon. And I said to Scott, I think that's madness of the first order. And he said, well, they're landing first stages on moving barges. I think they can land the stationary moon. It's it's really incredible.
Good point, Scott.
Yeah, it's similar to what Gene Cernan has said on a number of occasions, which is that landing on the moon was nothing compared to landing on an aircraft carrier. The ship is moving, it's pitching, it's dark out, to night landings especially. It's dark out, and when I went on that morale tour, we flew out to the USS Eisenhower aircraft carrier. We did a tailhook landing and a catapult liftoff. It was a really incredible experience. And as we were approaching the Eisenhower, they opened the bottom hatch of the airplane, the ramp that's used to load cargo. They opened the bottom hatch so we could see the carrier deck in the water beneath us. And that is one tiny target compared to the enormity of the ocean around it. And, these, Navy pilots are practiced in doing that. So for Cernan, give me a flat, long stretch of stationary moon, and I'll be a lot happier landing there.
Yeah,
that's such a thing that he can say to like 4 other people ever.
Right, exactly.
Landing on the moon was fine. An aircraft carrier, you're like, all right, you're
exactly.
you're like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that can say.
I guess Scott Kelly knows it too, right? I guess he's landed on a carrier, but yeah, well, that's right. I'm just thinking about that open hatch now.
How is that advisable?
Even me out a little bit.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing because it was just completely open to space. We could, you slide down that. It's basically the hatch that's lowered to create a ramp on a tarmac if you're rolling, moving assets aboard like Jeeps. And it was us inside this plane with a giant hole in the bottom of the plane leading straight down to the carrier deck. It was pretty scary.
And you're like, I should write the book about Gemini.
I never got to do that. Yeah, and the catapult launch, that kind of scared me, because I didn't know what it was going to be like. Lovell was on that plane with us, and I said to him afterwards, I said, that catapult was something. And he said, well, I don't know, I was asleep, and it woke me up slightly, but because we taxied for a long time on the carrier deck. So these guys are completely unmoved by the thing.
You were like, did you hear that boom when we took off? And he's like, I don't hear booms anymore.
It's like, dude, I've been on a Saturn V and remembered the time before that when I was on a Saturn V. This is nothing.
This is nothing, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. Lovell said to me once, these guys put things in such a human perspective. When we were writing Apollo 13, he and Marilyn were planning a vacation, and he said, we can go anywhere. But I've been to Asia, I've been to South America, I've been to the Antarctic, I've been to the moon, I've been to Europe. And he just tossed the moon in. And it wasn't even first on the list. It came after Africa and Antarctica. And he wasn't trying, he wasn't playing for a joke there. He's just ticking through the places he's visited in his life.
And you were like, well, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you, though?
Right.
Does it drive you nuts when people get the quote from Apollo 13 wrong?
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, does that drive you nuts?
No, and funnily, when the movie came out, the New York Times, which gave it a rave review, opened with that fact that the movie says, Houston, we have a problem. And of course, it was Houston, we've had a problem. And they said, and I thought they were going to say this was the first of many, fictionalized aspects of it and the first of many errors. And they said this was the first example in a tiny syntactical way that Ron Howard streamlined this mission and made it seamless. There wasn't a ton of downtime in the movie. They consolidated 3 or 4 engine burns into that one dramatic engine burn where Lovell took a bead on the Earth, to aim the spacecraft. But yeah, they pointed that out as a perfect example of why the movie moved as swiftly and compellingly as it did.
All right. Now I'm saying Gemini, and I'm no longer being annoyed by this, Jake. The only reason the only reason the small syntactical change that it is, I think, is notable as somebody who's like, yeah, but they're dealing with the problem and telling you about it versus asking you what we should do about it. I feel like that's the syntactical difference of like, we got this going on up here and we're gonna figure it out versus like, I don't know what's going on here. You guys are gonna have to let us know. Now, like, we know how it played out, but I always thought that was different. But, while we're at it, do you think Armstrong really screwed up his first words on the moon?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I saw an interview with him on I think it was 60 Minutes. I'm not sure. And they were walking through a museum and they stopped next to a mock-up of a lamb. And they asked him about it. And he said, well, I thought I said it right, but I maybe said it wrong. We'll never know. And, I remember back in 69 when newscasters were trying to make sense of it because the A was missing. They initially said he did say the A, but it was lost in static. And no, he didn't. And let's just, I mean, a lot of places, a lot of print outlets will put the A in, and sometimes in brackets, to make it make sense, but indicate that, that it's not quite what he said. But it's a little bit like, I was down at the Naval Academy in October for the service and funeral and burial of Jim Lovell, and he and Marilyn are side by side. They're back together now, which is so nice because they were together for 71 years in life. And they have a beautiful headstone, and it's black marble headstone, and etched in it is Jim's quote. I've seen the Earth as an oasis in the grand vastness of space. And he actually said in the big vastness of space, which is kind of redundant. So they changed it, cleaned up the quote for his headset.
You know the role of a good editor.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's not like a perfect example to illustrate how we can't always trust primary sources, I don't know what else is. I'm just thinking about all the history we've done by like digging up like old Sumerian like gravestones and being like, oh, this is the grave of King whatever who did this. And it's like, did he? I don't know.
Yeah, you sure you got
that? Yeah.
I got a weird one for you. You need to write a minor part 2 and go down the weird Department of Defense storyline on how might we use the Gemini spacecraft in all these different ways. And some of the blue suit stuff.
Right, and there was consideration of a Gemini anchored space station. It would have just been, like an Agena-sized vehicle attached to the nose of the spacecraft that would serve as the first space station. There was talk of flying the ship around the moon and coming home, which never would have worked because it wasn't built for hitting the atmosphere at 25,000 miles an hour, and it wasn't built for 5,000 degrees on its heat shield. It was built for easing into the atmosphere at 17,500 miles an hour, generating no greater than 3,000 degrees on the heat shield. So it was a nice idea, but they would have had to have basically rebuilt the ship.
Yeah, and even the manned orbiting laboratory version had the hatch through the heat shield.
Right,
never sits right with me.
Nah.
That makes very little sense. I mean,
wasn't Big Gemini a thing too? There was like
It wasn't what? Oh,
there was
Big
like
Gemini.
Big Gemini. It was a thing. Big Gemini. Yeah, there was a.
Gemini was the thing. Yeah, they were talking about an enlarged vehicle. I don't know that they could have seated 3 people, but it would have given the 2 there a little bit more room for longer duration flights.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking about the heat shields, I love going to see the Gemini capsules in museums because they tilt them on their side and you can see the underside where they have sort of like there's like streaks of
Yeah.
where it hit the atmosphere, and you can see how it does the thing where the center of gravity is off center, so it's
Right.
like it's coming in banked, right? So it kind of like float or skipping on the atmosphere, or whatever it is. So it's like just that off center spread. That's one of my favorite things to see. It's
Yeah,
like
it
such a
really is
good
amazing to look
visualization
at.
of like science.
Yeah, and you think of the thermal violence that etched those lines into it.
Yeah.
It just gives you a sense of what they were experiencing as they came through the atmosphere. That's why I've always said, people ask me, would you go to space? And I said yes, on the condition that I would be under general anesthetic for the liftoff and the reentry, because I don't even like roller coasters. So I ain't lifting off of a rocket, at least not conscious, and I'm not coming back that way either. Transport me to space and I'd be very happy floating in the space station. But if I were there, I ain't coming home because I'm not doing that reentry.
I have the same kind of thing where I like roller coasters that are mostly like flips and turns and interesting
Right.
stuff, and I hate ones that are just only drops. Like I just like this
Right.
is not that enjoyable. So then I'm like, God damn it, would I hate free fall, or is it totally different? Like because you don't have the wind sensation and everything around, you're rapidly approaching the ground. Like, is that what I don't like about the experience? And I would be fine if it was free fall. I gotta
Right.
buck up and get a 0G flight ticket is what I gotta do. That'll answer the question.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity and I've declined. When we were shooting Apollo 13 and they were doing the 0G scenes in the Vomit Comet, and I was included in, virtually any step of that movie I wanted to be included in. But I was not invited aboard the KC-135 Vomit Comet plane. And I was saying to friends, I have never been so grateful to be disinvited from an event in my life, because I couldn't have said no if they had asked me, but I would have deeply wanted to say no. So this, I never had to deal with it.
Man. The other thing that makes me bummed about potential spaceflight future is that I'm intensely skeptical of cruise ships and the various gastrointestinal diseases that you tend to catch on them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they have a lot of fresh air on these things. It's going to be bleak if you've got 100 people in a starship going somewhere.
Yeah,
Like, it's going to
exactly. Yeah, I think
rough.
that Starship, I know, I don't care how robust the air filtration system is. Even air on airplanes is filthy. We just ran a story about that in the health pages in the health section of Time. And, it's just filled with pathogens. You've got 250 people in a metal tube sitting shoulder to shoulder. How that's not basically ground zero for every infectious agent in the world, I don't know.
Are you telling me you didn't believe all of the post-COVID propaganda about how flying was like the cleanest air? It's actually cleaner than the ground because of all the class 10 HEPA filters or whatever things they put in the vents.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. I mean, I was,
the dude next to me sneezed right into the HEPA filter for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember smoking on airplanes, and I'm also old enough to remember the folly of having a smoking section and a non-smoking section midway through the plane, as if the smoke is going to stop at seat B23. That's not how it works. It was as smoky in the front as it was in the back. And don't tell me pathogens don't move the same way.
Yeah.
Jake's a cruise ship stan though, so maybe he feels differently about this.
Yeah, I've been on lots. I've never gotten sick really, so.
Well, I guess we'll see how that goes for you in the future.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. We do have to do the Vomit Comet though.
We do, yes, we do.
It's
We got to figure
part
it
of the
out.
show's
We have
lore.
we have a movie to film there, a romantic comedy, the Off-Nom Vom-Com Rom-Com. Yeah.
That's in our future.
like
If
that.
you'd like to be the producer, Jeffrey, let us know. It's obviously a highly attractive product.
Yeah, count me in. I am happily a part of it.
We won't make you come on the filming of it. You can.
That's
say
good.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't ask you. Yeah.
Uh-uh.
I wanted to ask this. I usually ask this to any author we have on, but like, most people who write a book about something go into it with a pretty good, like, baseline of knowledge about what you're writing about. Yeah, I assume you weren't a complete novice about what Gemini was doing before you started writing it. And so I'm always interested to know, after writing it, like, what did you learn? Like, what is the most interesting thing that you didn't know going into it that now you do, having done, the on the ground research for it?
I think what I didn't know is something you guys mentioned earlier, which is that iterative process between Mercury and Gemini. I had always assumed that they came into the Gemini program with a plan to build a ship that was a bigger sibling of the Mercury, that looked like the Mercury, that in some ways flew like the Mercury, but with a much more nimble set of thrusters. And the ability to accommodate two men. But I had not realized that they considered, just sticking with Mercury, making it a little bit more robust, and continuing to have one-person flights with, the astronaut exiting through the nose of the ship for an EVA, and being able to stay aloft for a week, even though I don't know how they would do that in that tiny capsule. But what surprised me is the fact that it was not at all clear from the start that they were going to build a two-person Gemini spacecraft, and they had to go through a lot of theoretical engineering and a lot of planning sessions to decide, yes, this is the way we're going to go. But Gemini was absolutely not a done deal in terms of planning, as late as early in 1963, and when they finally decided on it. It was a crash course to get it flying by March of '65, which is when Gemini 3 flew.
Yeah, man, those timelines are they don't fit today. That would just, like, can you imagine NASA inventing a new human rated spacecraft in 1 year, and then 4 years later, like, it's flying with people on it? Like, I just, that kind of cycle just doesn't happen at NASA anymore. Like, that's just,
it's reminiscent of the lunar module, which took, I think, 7 years from conception to the Apollo 9 flight. And that's one of the reasons that I am so deeply skeptical of the possibility of us having astronauts on the surface of the moon before 2030, because they haven't even chosen a human landing system yet. And, you have to choose it, then you have to design it, and then you have to, flight test it, uncrewed, and then it has to be ready to fly astronauts to the lunar surface. And I just don't think the calendar will allow that, not by 2030. I do believe, look, my feeling is, I would obviously be happy if the next footprints on the moon are made by somebody with the stars and stripes on the shoulder of his or her spacesuit. But I will not be troubled at all if that next person is wearing the Chinese flag on the sleeve of the spacesuit, because it's not just emissaries of a nation that are going out there; it's emissaries of humanity. Michael Collins, I interviewed him in 2019 for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. And he said what struck him the most during his world tour afterwards was when people came up to him and said, "We did it." They didn't say you did it. They didn't say America did it. They said we did it, because Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins were living emissaries of the human species. They weren't just emissaries of their nation. And I think that's one of the, the richer and sweeter things about the global reaction to spaceflight. So I will be untroubled if a Chinese taikonaut beats us to the moon.
Beats you, yeah. An interesting counterfactual would be to wonder if that reaction had been the same if it was the Soviets who landed. Only because of just because they're humans, but there's different global reputations for those kinds of countries, right? No, China is a little more well received, I think, globally than the Soviet Union was, but still, there's.
I wasn't around, so that's tough to compare. But I'm like, that's an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, the Soviet Union was pretty damn scary back then. I remember being a little boy and hearing that Khrushchev said, "We will bury you." And I remember looking out the window of our playroom thinking, so is there going to be dirt covering the windows? I took him literally. Nikita Khrushchev scared the bejesus out of me in 1962.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah,
do you think if there was not the same, like the fact that we have such access to, limited as it is, what's going on within the Chinese space program and China generally, like there wasn't that in the 50s and 60s during the early days of the Cold War. It was this, the boogeyman that you could write yourself, and that played better to both sides to have the other kind of have a weird boogeyman perspective. Whereas now we're like, we got spy satellites that are taking photos of everything. We know what's going on over there. We've got social media. We can see videos, even stuff they don't want us to see, and we don't want them to see. Like, do you think the familiarity is what helps that, Jake, or is that?
Well, I think the free markets is a big thing, right? Like, even though China is
getting chips from the Soviet Union.
Yeah, like I know like China puts their finger on the scale, but like there's a much bigger culture of free market, economics in China than there was in the Soviet Union. Like they're still doing business with everybody everywhere and providing products, and like that's good, right? It's nice to be able to buy good stuff that's inexpensive, and China provides that, and so you get a lot of goodwill for that, right?
Also gulags. Yeah, like if there were gulags, but they were shipping good products our way too, it would have felt different than. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're all communicating right now on something made in China. Do you think that the same would be true in the 60s if they were like talking on Soviet phones? I don't think it would have worked that way, So
I have a feeling that the Ed Baldwin reaction was the exact reaction it would have gotten though, Jake, if the Soviets landed first. The steaming in a bar. Ed Baldwin view.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, China's progress is pretty extraordinary. I was speaking to someone. We had the Time 100 or the Time Magazine Person of the Year announced this morning, and we had the opening bell on Wall Street. So I was on the floor of the stock exchange this morning, which was
I'm thrilled to accept it. I'm absolutely thrilled. Yeah.
It's coming your way. The trophy is in the mail. But somebody I was speaking to said he had just been in Shenzhen. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. And he said, 30 years ago, the population of that city was like 18,000. Now it's 22 million. The Chinese just move fast and do remarkable things. And they're being pretty quiet about their effort to get to the moon. But, it seems clear that they are, very much targeting it.
Yeah, they do. They're going to win the market in a lot of ways, and you just get exposure like that. So I think it's a much less of a sheltered regime like the Soviets were. So
right.
Just was looking at the dates here, by the way. The first and last crewed flight of the Gemini mission, just fits really well in between every gap that was ever predicted between Artemis missions. It's
right.
Exactly. And then some. You might even be able to fit two of those entire things. The pace is just unbelievable.
That is so depressing. You could fit the entire Gemini program between Artemis.
Yeah, I remember
I was really intrigued by the parts of the book that were about that sort of the management side of things, because that definitely gets almost no coverage by anybody, because it probably was hard to crack into when there was so much happening so fast. You spend so much time on the missions, but actually being able to orchestrate that and keep that program on track and moving to hit those milestones every couple of weeks that's an incredibly impressive half of the thing that we never talk about.
Right. Yeah. Speed was very much of the essence when it came to Gemini. And, look, had there not been the Apollo 1 fire, had they built that capsule right the first time, we could have beaten the lunar deadline by 2 years, because that's how much time that fire happened on January 27th, 1967, and the next Apollo didn't fly until October 11th, 1968. So they lost about 21 months, which, had that capsule worked, we could have landed on the moon 20 months earlier than we had. So it would have been a 1967 landing. And that actually was JFK's initial target. Openly, he said, for public consumption, he said before the end of the 1960s, but within the administration, they wanted to do it by 1967 because it would have been, America's opportunity to spit in the Soviet soup, since that was the year they'd be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the revolution. And that's what JFK wanted. And had it not been for the fire, that's what he would have gotten.
They might have done it. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Pace it was a different world. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that.
Also, Jake, I know you're a big Rogallo wing fan. It gets its due in the book. What a weird storyline that is. I don't think I realized all the ins and outs that you have in the book about where it came from and how it sort of operated as a primary path for a little while. And
right. Yeah, it was Francis and Gertrude Rogallo, and I forget now where they were from, but they dreamed up the idea in their garage and initially used chintz curtains as the fabric for their model of their Rogallo wing. And it was an insanely complicated system for very little payoff. It would have had to have these wings somehow folded and stowed within the skin of the spacecraft. Then the sides of the spacecraft would have had to have opened to let the wings out. Then a pair of skids, would have had to come from the bottom of the spacecraft so they could land properly. And this picture is something that Neil Armstrong helped dream up, a 1/3 or 2/3 scale Rogallo wing, one passenger, an experimental model. And it actually worked after a fashion. But, when you're coming up against parachutes, which have been, in use for 300 years, why in the world do you want to introduce this insanely complex system into the spacecraft for very little payoff?
It looks like a Michelangelo drawing. Like one of those that fits in the line of crazy inventions from 500 years ago.
The Ornithopter of spacecraft.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's ridiculous looking.
Yeah, it really is.
And the reason was because the astronauts wanted to fly it, right? I think you mentioned this. They wanted to fly home. They don't want to ride home. Yeah.
Right. And the ostensible reason was to keep the spacecraft out of the hands of the Soviets should a crew land very much off target the way Scott Carpenter did, and land in Soviet waters or areas that the Soviets were patrolling. The fear was the spacecraft and the astronauts would have been scooped up as propaganda targets, and Russia could have reverse engineered our Gemini, but that wasn't likely to happen. The Russians weren't going to do this. It did reduce the area of possible recovery spots. Had Scott Carpenter landed 250 miles off target, and that meant that they were searching something like 16,000 square miles of ocean for him. So if you can eliminate that and land on the land, you are basically landing on a military runway, so the recovery would have been much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that thing that I showed the photo of? Isn't that in the Udvar Hazy Center, the Smithsonian?
Is it? It might be. I'm not sure.
I feel like it's been displayed there in the space shuttle. I'm 85% sure that me and you looked at it together, Jake. I'm pretty sure we fit there.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Amy Shira Teitel. She runs she's an amazing woman. She knows more about space than virtually anyone I know. She's a 39-year-old Canadian who was not around for most of those programs. And yet she's incredibly knowledgeable. And when I first met her, the only time I met her, she interviewed me when my book on Apollo 8 came out. I noticed that she had a tattoo of a Gemini spacecraft under the Rogallo wings with its landing skids out. And I looked at her and said, Amy, you are the real deal. There is no one in the world, even an astronaut. It wasn't just a Gemini capsule. I mean, she got deep enough into the history to know the early models that never flew. She's really amazing. I watch her YouTube channel all the time.
Yeah, she does us proud.
I guess I have to pull a photo because there's a picture that I have of you behind Discovery, and you can see it in the background. So I know that it's there. Yeah.
I've seen it then. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yes. All right. I can pull this up. We'll get back to me in a minute. I'm pulling up a picture.
Okay. Yeah. No. This. That's one of my favorite things about studying like historical spacecraft is some of the ideas that never were. Like Regalo Wing and the dinosaur,
Oh
Right.
yeah, the
Dream
X-20.
Chaser, like prototype, all those kind of things. Yeah,
Right.
the vertical takeoff, all those kind of spacecraft. They're always so fun. I don't know. There's something just really, really charming about them.
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
It's
they've
good.
got a real sci-fi quality to them. They're like Tintin goes to the moon.
Here we
Yeah,
go, Jake. This
exactly.
is our off-nominal meetup at Udvarhazy. You can see it off to the left there.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
beautiful.
There it
Yeah,
is.
like
So
big parachute over top of it.
proof. There's a
Big
picture
wing.
of us
Yeah.
with it.
Nice.
It exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shuttles are really gorgeous machines. It was either Charles Krauthammer or George Will in talking about the fact that in many ways the shuttle program was in critical ways, it was a failure because, 40% of the spacecraft either exploded or disintegrated, killing 2 crews. So, it's hard to take that black mark off of off the shuttle's history. And it's hard to say that it was, a perfect flying machine the way the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft were. But man, it was pretty, and man, it was complex, and man, it was inspiring to see that thing come in for a landing, and lift off under its 5 engines, 2 solids and 3 liquid. But either George Will or Charles Krauthammer, in acknowledging its troubled history, said, "The shuttle belongs in the museum of things too beautiful to exist." And I think that's a really nice way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a space shuttle apologist, so I will take that to the bank. Yeah.
What? All right, but if NASA got actually, you were here for most of this storyline, so I would like to pick your brain about when the shuttle was being proposed. Were you following the TikTok of which format of the shuttle was actually getting approved and going to make it into development? And did you have a favorite that didn't make it?
I had a favorite that didn't make it, but it didn't make it because no one has engineered this properly yet, and that is the single stage to orbit spacecraft. You take off in one piece, you return in one piece, nothing is shed along the way, there are no external tanks. And that was the original plan for the shuttle, to take off like a rocket, re-enter like an airplane, but do it in one piece the entire way. And as soon as they began sticking hardware on the outside, 2 solid fuel rockets on either side, and the giant external tank under the belly of the ship, it became an imperfect and much more complicated spacecraft. The clean lines of an SSTO, a single stage to orbit, it's an elusive dream because, when you pack enough fuel into it to allow it to make that journey, then you add a lot of weight, which means bigger engines, and bigger engines add weight, which means more fuel, and you get into a vicious circle of, engineering that takes you into just a complete inescapable spiral. So, nobody knew at the time, or at least the public didn't know at the time, that SSTO was a very hard thing to do, and the shuttle likely would never be able to achieve it. So yeah, they wound up with all of those external components.
Yeah. Earth is a 2-stage planet, unfortunately. It's
Yeah,
the burden we bear, 2-stage at a minimum.
2 stage at a minimum. Yeah, and the Musk's Starship lunar landing spacecraft, in theory, would be single stage to orbit. It would, land
From
and
the
take
moon, yeah.
off. But I think, I was talking to people at Lockheed Martin who are proposing the alternative human landing system, and theirs is going to go off the old lunar module model with a 2-stage spacecraft and the ascent stage using the descent stage as a launch platform and taking off. And I think that makes sense. I mean, it's worked before. I don't know why in the world we want to complicate it now with 150-foot silo-shaped spacecraft. It's not a plausible or realistic scenario.
Yeah. Scott Kelly's going to find you and just tell you how it is when it sticks to landing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Huh.
You're not a big fan of the elevator, I take it.
Oh man, is that insane? There were 9 rungs on the lunar module, and the last one was like 3 feet above the surface, so they had to jump. That's fine. the idea that you need an elevator on the surface of the moon, that is too much hardware. That's swatting a fly with a blunderbuss rifle. It makes no sense at all.
I like that analogy. That's good.
Yeah. Just depends how much it costs to get a version that doesn't have an elevator. That's their kicker here,
Exactly.
you know?
Right.
So, especially when there's a company talking about IPOing and
Yeah, I got an email this morning from a Wall Street analysis firm that was offering an interview, and they said from their data crunching, SpaceX would be valued at $2.4 trillion. And, I think that's all Musk again, because, it's an amazing company and it does amazing things. And the Falcon 9 is basically the world's workhorse rocket, which, has never existed before. A commercial rocket that countries around the world can use, but still $2.4 trillion. That is completely out of range for what that company should.
I was telling Jake this before we went live. I think it's still too low because you can't put a price on priceless, and I think until anyone shows any hope of approaching SpaceX as the outlier in the industry, they are an actual priceless piece of infrastructure for the country and the world in many ways. They are the outlier in so many extremes that it doesn't make sense, and they are invaluable as an asset.
Right. I tend to agree with you, and I mean, the first time I visited there, the first time I interviewed Musk, it was well before he became, the political pariah that he's become. Actually, I interviewed him 3 times, and the last time was when we made him Person of the Year in 2021. And he was quite personable and, quite genial, and he handled the press well, and he handled the attention well, and he spoke with a little humility. He and I were on CBS for a piece on the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing of Apollo 11. And I was talking about Pad 39A, which is, where Apollo 11 took off from, where every lunar module lunar mission except Apollo 10 took off from. And now Musk had a 10-year lease on Pad 39A. And I said, so you've got 39A, one of the most iconic pieces of real estate in the space program. And he said, I know, I'm not worthy. I don't know how I got this. It was a really wonderful and strangely humble thing for him to say.
Well, I mean, Starship coming soon there. Going big into Florida. That storyline's going to hit us quicker than we're ready for. I think there's a lot of work to go in Florida before they start flying Starship from there, but I would bet that as a shock to the industry, they would like to fly one as soon as practically possible, just to make a statement of Starship has arrived on the Space Coast. Because the storyline for years has been they're going to be messy and dirty and, blow up a lot of things in Texas. And then once it's all buttoned up and tidy, it'll come over to Florida for the operations. And those timelines have converged in the fact that Starship program is still a bit of a mess. And I don't know. I feel like they're going to want to get one off from Florida as soon as they can.
I think they will, yeah. I mean, Boca Chica has seen a lot, but it's made a lot of noise and it's done a lot of environmental damage, and it doesn't have his Starbase doesn't have anywhere near the geographical reach that Canaveral has. And I think ultimately they're going to have to start launching from Canaveral and do away with Boca Chica. It's just the residents don't like it. The wildlife hates it. It's just too big a rocket for an even sparsely populated patch of land.
Yeah. Yeah, the shipping lane problem is a big issue there too. Like, there's just not a very good clean trajectory out of there. You're going over tons of boats and countries and islands and flight paths, and it's just very crowded, kind of coming out of that way, right?
Yeah.
Jeffrey, before we get you out of here, tell people where you want them to buy the book. Gemini, Stepping Stone to the Moon, The Untold Story. It's pronounced Gemini, not Gemini. It says it's too small for people to see on stream, but that's the second subtitle.
Yeah, and available wherever all fine books are sold. The St. Martin's Press, St. Martin's site is the best place to buy it, but it is available everywhere, Amazon, and hard copies in physical bookstores. That's my favorite way to get any book.
I read half of it on the hard copy and audibled my way through a lot of it when I've been busy the last couple of days, which is, if you're a listener, it's up there. I know.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm really
pleased. That like
pleased.
listening. It's always a good thing when it hits so close to the release date. Sometimes it takes too long to hit the audiobook version, but
Right. No,
enjoy it.
they did that during the year we were producing the book, so I was really happy that they did it. And we had long discussions about whether it should be Gemini or Gemini, and we settled on Gemini just because we didn't want to throw people off and confuse them with the program.
And it hurts you that's why you don't listen to the audiobook version, right? You don't
Exactly. That's right.
You'll never hear it.
Yeah, it's anathema. It's just not. It's it's a violation of all that's historically holy.
Well, it wouldn't be the first audiobook to mispronounce something, so that's I think you're safe there.
Right.
Well, thanks for hanging out. And yeah, any other books you want people to scoop up? You've got Apollo 13, obviously we talked about. I bet everyone that listens to this show has at least read it at some point in their life. But anything else you want to point them
to? Apollo 8, that was a whole lot of fun to write. It was Apollo 13 revisited without the accident, but with the poetic history of orbiting the moon. And there's Holdout, my novel that came out in 2021 about an American astronaut who refuses to leave the space station when her rotation is over. And she has a reason, and it's a pretty compelling reason. And I had a ton of fun writing that book.
Is she the one that drilled the hole in the Soyuz that one time?
Yeah, they never quite worked that out. Yeah.
I think we know who it was.
She wanted to stay in international waters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Jake, we got a big week next week, man. It's our favorite show of the year. Every year we award the off-nominee. The Off-Nominal awards take place, in which we award the thing that went most chaotically wrong in space. Stiff competition this year. 1 week left for the Australians to get their act together and send us the goddamn video of the Gilmore Space launch vehicle deploying its fairing on the launch pad. The video exists. We are told this. We are pressing them to send it to us. We will air it on the show. You will win the award. It is the only time this award can be bought with a video file. Yeah. I'm going to call my shot too, Jake. I got something else going on next week. Flying close to the tower here because there's an 85% chance this gets rescheduled. But if it doesn't, on Tuesday, I'm driving down to the Pentagon. I'm going in to interview General Saltzman for an hour, the head of the Space Force, which is going to be wild. So that'll
fantastic.
Be fun. So that'll be on Miko, the other feed. I don't know. I convinced them to let me come in and hang out and record for an hour. So we're going to talk a lot about.
To hear this story.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting.
Terrific.
So we'll tell that a little next week on the show too. I think Brendan Byrne is hanging out with us for the off-nominees, by the way, Jake.
Oh,
excellent. A production meeting here on the air. So.
All right.
All right, y'all. Get the book. It's great. You'll love it. We promise. Jeffrey, thank you for hanging out with us. Hopefully you'll come back and when you're not on the pressures of the junket and hang out again.
I would love that. You guys have a great show, and it's been a pleasure talking space with two such knowledgeable people.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, he's trying to get rebooked, Jake.
Yeah. He wants it back in.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
All right. Thanks, guys.